Hey, Whole Five fam, welcome to today's episode. We are coming up on about a year of living in this global pandemic, y'all. And I have to say, I don't know how everybody else out there is feeling about this, but just to think back over the past year, and it's almost like I have no concept of time when it comes to 2020. I'm trying to recall things and everything's all jumbled between the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd over the summer and all the uprisings. And I mean, I don't have to tell y'all like everything that we just went through. I'm not going to bring us to that point, but just to say, wow, like I'm recording this episode coming up on this year anniversary, and it's really hitting me. I've been thinking about how we've been basically through a full cycle of seasons. So in Chinese medicine and acupuncture, which is what I practice in my full-time life, we talk a lot about the seasons and about experiencing life through the seasons and trying to stay in balance with each season in order to stay healthy. And 2020 was kind of a wash because there we were in spring, supposedly ready to like launch and create new visions and plans for the next full year and, watch our seeds that we maybe planted in winter, our ideas, our possibilities start to spring up and, get set to do things. And then boom, we got hit with the pandemic and all. So coming up on this year and coming through this whole cycle of seasons, I'm realizing that we've learned how to experience life in a whole different way. I mean, we've adjusted to it, I think, and I'm just speaking for all of us right now. Really, I can only speak for myself, but we've adjusted to life for better or for worse through this experience. There are things personally that I miss about, what I used to experience before the pandemic, before COVID, like taking a vacation. I almost don't remember what that feels like. Not complaining, not feeling sorry for myself. I'm totally grateful for the roof over my head and for food security and all the blessings. But I'm also thinking, wow, I really don't remember what it's like to lay on a beach and just relax that way. But there are aspects of COVID-19 life that I actually do appreciate as well. So in addition to the things I miss, and maybe everyone else can relate listening to this, there are things that I think we gained, like not burning the candle at both ends. I really take my rest periods seriously, the way I counsel my patients in my practice to do. If you're watching this right now, you might see behind me, I have my beloved chaise lounge, which is where I spend as much time as I can reading or listening to podcasts or planning or just resting, just chilling out. So I really am starting to practice what I preach, and I can thank the pandemic for that. I can also thank the pandemic for new friends, for having met people virtually online. I don't think I ever thought that I would be in a position in life to be meeting new people that way. The online dating scene kind of passed me by because I ended up being married 20 years ago, before we even had that kind of resource. And so I just figured that ship would have sailed, but I'm not dating online, but I'm meeting new friends and really amazing people. And some of those people have started to appear on this podcast. So I'm excited to introduce you to one of them in a moment. But I want to get back to talking about healthy, balanced life and living. If that's one thing that I can say I've taken away from 2020. And I think a lot of people have shared that same notion that, yeah, it really got us to slow down in many ways. Some people slowed down involuntarily, but slowed nevertheless. And some people maybe not so much. Maybe they just tried to find a way to continue to burn the candle at both ends. So today's guest is an expert on this very subject. She has made it part of her life's mission to help women identify the signs that they're heading toward burnout. And she helps guide them safely back to balance. So I'm going to bring her on the screen and I'm going to talk about her a little bit before. Here we go. And let me brag about my friend for a moment. So after more than 20 years developing marketing, communications, fundraising, and branding strategies for businesses and nonprofit organizations, Tiffany Green experienced a health crisis that made her reevaluate her career and the importance of work-life balance. Today, she is a coach and a psychotherapist. She guides high-achieving women through the process of finding a greater sense of clarity, balance, and connection during professional transitions. She wakes up each morning excited about her work and committed to supporting other women in feeling the same. She is passionate about helping women avoid burnout and lead healthy, grounded, and more fulfilled lives. Tiffany lives in Chicago, Illinois, which is also where she practices. And I am so pleased and honored that Tiffany would come on this show. So I'm pleased to introduce you all to Tiffany. Welcome to the Whole 5/5 podcast, Tiffany.
Thank you, Leah. I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited about the launch of your podcast.
Thank you. It's exciting, right? I mean, like I said, the one thing that I can really say would not have happened if it weren't for 2020 and all of what that entailed, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it could have happened, but not in the way that it came about. So I
Yeah.
am grateful, and I'm grateful that you agreed to come on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for encouraging me to come on the show.
Yes, I think you, like I told you, I think that you have a lot to share and a lot to offer, and people can benefit from hearing your wisdom and your experience and your expertise in this field of psychotherapy, of coaching. You wear a few different hats, and you've got a lot of trainings under your belt. And so I'm excited to get into this conversation with you because I think we can learn a lot. Is there anything that you wanted to say from the outset that maybe I didn't speak into in the introduction?
No, perfect. Perfect.
Okay. All right, great. So Tiffany, when I have people on this podcast, I typically begin with a few questions to get us started because, as you know, this podcast is about transcending racism through healing.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to talk a little bit about racism and how it affects us, we need to talk about race. So when it comes to race, how do you self-identify and how do you believe others in the world perceive you
Yeah.
racially?
I identify as Black or African American. Either one of those works for me. And I think anyone who sees me will say she is very brown.
Okay. All right.
I think they will know, and I have locks, so I think people will know that I am Black.
You have beautiful locks from
Thank
what I can
you.
see here.
Thank you.
We
Thank
were
you.
joking last time we spoke because, like I said in the intro, that I've met some people along the way, thanks to the pandemic, virtually met people. And you're one of those people. And where I
Yeah.
remember saying, I don't know what you look like from the armpits down. It's very interesting, but I can see those beautiful locks. So
Yes.
I would be able to, if I saw you out in the street, as long as I could see you from the waist up, I might be able to identify you.
Yes. We'll see. I think that's a dynamic that a lot of us are experiencing now. We don't know what we look like in,
Right.
person. So
Right. And so we probably don't want to know what people are wearing from the bottom,
that is true.
because sweatpants, I think the sweatpant industry is probably doing quite well right now,
I
right?
know. I know. Sweatpants, fuzzy slippers, all of that. Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah, I have my flip flops on right now, but
That's
nobody can
good.
see. Yeah, I
Good.
mean, you think I'm wearing heels under this table? And first of all,
Exactly.
I'm not wearing heels anymore at all. I gave those up like a couple decades ago. I mean, unless I'm trying to get fancy, but those things are coming off in the car on the way home for sure.
I know, like you were talking about, earlier, like, what this period has given us, like some of the, obvious, pain,
Hmm.
but like, some of the, um, nice things that it's given us is that we're able to focus on what's important to us, what feels good to us. And if you want to rock those flip-flops
Exactly. You're
instead of those
right.
heels, I am all for it.
Right. It's like comfort has become more accepted, maybe. It's like it's not
Yeah.
some kind of guilty pleasure that you come home and take your bra off or something. I mean, it's like you might not put it on all day. I mean, can I just be really frank? The first 3 months of the pandemic, this is gross for anybody. Now they're getting to know me a little bit more than they really ever did want to, but there were a couple days in there where I was like, did I shower today? When is the last time I took a shower? And now I look back and I realize, like, I think I was probably borderline depressed on some of those darker
Yeah.
days, And I laugh about it now, but like, yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny then too. It's like, oh well, I don't care nobody can smell me through Zoom, so
That is true. Like
so
I have a friend who posted on social media that at the beginning of the pandemic, his wife was saying to him, "Did you wash your hands? Did you wash your hands? Did you wash your hands?" And then it switched to, "Did you shower? Did you at least
right.
shower today?"
Did you at least shower? And you can wash your
Exactly.
hands in there.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So
See, we have too much fun. So
I
let me
know.
go
Okay.
back.
Yeah.
Let me go
Yeah.
back to what I was asking you. So clear, you identify as a Black woman or African American, and it's
Yeah.
clear you haven't had any issues where people mistake you for some other race,
No.
which
No.
happens as, you're talking to someone that has happened to. And
Yeah.
so it's an interesting question. And sometimes it's like, okay, yeah. And also sometimes people, you know, have particular words that they prefer using. Sometimes Black and African American might be interchangeable and
Right.
sometimes not. So I always
Yeah.
like to start off with that just to check.
Yeah.
And my next question, though, is a lot more individualized, I guess. Knowing that race is simply a construct, it's a construct that we are living in. So we can't separate ourselves from race or transcend race itself, even though I'd like to think we could one day transcend racism. Race is a construct that, exists. So, what has the construct of race, what kind of impact has that had on you, Tiffany, living in the United States or people in your family? Can you speak to that?
Oh, Leah, that is such a big, important question. Um, and I think if you would have asked me like at different points in my life, I would have given you different answers.
Yeah.
But right now, I think here comes my cat.
Oh,
I think
well, my
right.
dog might come too. So
Really good. We're having pet
that's
visitors.
another, yeah, that's another feature of our situation.
Yes. I can see your tail in the corner, but I think answering that question today, I would say like more than I fully realized. And I
Hmm.
say that because I've always been kind of an ambitious go-getter, setting person. Like that is
Hmm.
how I, define myself. That is how I found value in. That is how my parents raised me. I was raised to be proud of the fact that I was Black or African American, and they didn't sugarcoat anything. They made it
Hmm.
clear that things might be a little bit harder for me because of my race and also my gender as well.
Hmm.
And so when I would, find myself facing microaggressions or maybe just full on aggressions, I didn't
Hmm.
dwell on it. I kind of like pushed that aside and, went on in order to reach whatever goal that I had in mind.
Hmm.
But then last summer, you mentioned George
Hmm.
Floyd, I was about to say the death of George Floyd, but let's call it what it is, the murder of
Hmm.
George Floyd.
Yep.
It was really intense for me
Mm.
because I started feeling this overwhelm of emotions like anger and sadness and grief and maybe some rage if I'm honest.
Right.
And I think it was that moment in that time where we were all focused on racial justice and racial inequities. And in hindsight, I recognize that, I was feeling the intensity of that moment. I was feeling the intergenerational trauma of being a person of African descent in the United States. I also was, I'm a psychotherapist and a coach. I was supporting my clients during that time deal with, their traumas around race, and then also my own. And, during that time, all of these things that people had said to me in the past, being, called, another coworker who's Black's name, or, being dismissed at a meeting, or asking a question and then someone looking past you to your white colleague in order to respond to the question. Like, all of that just started bubbling up for me. And I realized in that moment that maybe just casually turning past all of the things that had happened to me as a coping mechanism, I realized that I'm not sure that was serving me anymore. That was a coping mechanism that I learned in order to deal with all of that trauma. I decided after that I was going to do things differently. I was going to be more direct in allowing myself to feel whatever came up for me in those moments. When there are some microaggressions, or, like I said, some things that are even more overt being thrown at me. So.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. The whole full circle that you brought us, from talking about these microaggressions and your ability and the way that you were brought up to just move them aside, just keep moving them aside. But I guess they didn't really go very far. I mean, you were still, they still were living in you in some way.
Exactly.
For them to come up after George Floyd's murder and all of the uprising of last summer shows, that they were still there. And I wonder if you recognize them at the time as microaggressions. I mean, how much did you, if at all, stop to think, let me file that away under the microaggression, file in my body? Or did the thinking and the processing really come all at once? Kind of, as it seems like maybe you described a little bit, like just everything kind of coming up for evaluation at the same time.
I think I did recognize them as, microaggressions, because, like, I felt it in my spirit, like, like that was weird. Like,
right.
that was a little inappropriate, because I think most people do, when you're being dismissed, or when you're being, slighted, and that could be because of your race, your gender, your age, you feel it internally.
Feel it.
Yeah. So I did recognize it. I think I just distilled it quickly. I was like, all right, I felt that does not serve me to, like, process or dwell on that. Let me move through this as quickly, or move around it. Maybe that's a better, description. Move around it as quickly as possible to do what it is that I need to do.
And I think what you're highlighting right now, for me anyway, Tiffany, is how we really can honor everyone, every survivor, every person who's alive now, carrying our own pain from these transgressions, carrying our ancestors' pain from what they experienced, so that we have this intergenerational effect of what we're carrying, but honoring that we are here and that we are surviving as best we can, for however that, shows up. I had a patient recently, she and I were getting into a conversation about intergenerational trauma and things like this. And she said, listen, I'm from the South. Like, this racism stuff is open and commonplace, and you can't do anything about it. So what are you going to do? You can't just sit there and dwell on it. And I was kind of getting into a sparring match with her and saying, wait a minute, you can't not do something about it. We've got to do something. And she was going, no, I don't have time for that. And I could hear in her voice the sort of like cutting off and saying, I have gotten really good at compartmentalizing that and accepting that that is just how some people are and this is how it's going to be. And her message to me was, and she's quite a few years my senior, so I was like, she's my elder, so I'm listening to her. She's there for treatment from me, but I consider her like this wise, Black woman. So far be it from me to tell her she's wrong, but she's like, this is another way. You can't call every single thing out. You can't let every single thing set you back and slow you down. So I just wanted to pop that in because the Tiffany prior to 2020 was also implementing a useful strategy to get through. And maybe now, as it has all kind of bubbled back up, it is ripe for processing, maybe, or in little bits. And maybe some of it gets sort of tucked away. But I think we would do well to honor ourselves and one another as we're parsing through this, because it's a lot. It is centuries worth.
Right? Literally centuries. And I am not faulting, people like myself and your client who, make a decision that they aren't going to dwell on it. But I know, just as my professionally as a psychotherapist and a coach, that often coping mechanisms start to have diminishing returns. And when that happens, you really need to sit and look and determine if this is working for you. And I think that's what happened to me. Like, I realized that my coping mechanism was not working as well as it had in the past. And that maybe I needed to look at that in order to reevaluate.
Excellent. Yeah. That actually is a great segue, because I do want to get to looking at coping mechanisms and getting into the real meat of what we're going to talk about today, which is burnout and identifying the signs of burnout and getting into all that good, rich information that I would love for you to share with our listeners. And just before we do that, the third question I always ask the guests that come on is, what is your personal definition of healing and how does it show up in your work? So if we could just start with that and then we'll move to the other stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, healing, I'm a spiritual person, in addition to, it serves as a backdrop for how I live my life and how I approach, pretty much everything. And I believe that we are born whole. And I believe that, just through living, things get slowly taken away from us. Like, we have these interactions with people that, leave scars or take a chip out of us, or, maybe even just flatten us a little bit. And I feel healing is about removing all of that, processing all of that. So we can let the fullness of who we are, the wholeness of who we are, shine through. And that's how beautiful. Thank you. And that's kind of how I try to, live my life. That's how I approach my work with, my clients, and, my therapy clients and my coaching clients, is understanding that, there's a whole person underneath that. And there's some layers of things that are blocking them from, fully expressing that. So I want to excavate, I want to process, I want to help them remove some of these barriers that allow them to be their full, whole, authentic self.
Nice. Okay. Well, I love that as a way to start, this next bit of the conversation. So you see your clients as whole already, that we're born this way and that they're coming to you so that they can help recover and reclaim that awareness of their wholeness. I mean, that's like totally in line with the way I see it as well, Tiffany. So we're on the same page. It's like people come in and it's almost like they don't recognize themselves as whole anymore. And there was a time when they did. I don't know if that's what they thought, because as young children, I don't think we even give this concept a thought, but we know. You look at a child, and as long as that child has not been mistreated too early in life, but they're just so free to express and curious about life, and their wholeness and their fullness and their awareness of that is like beaming from them. And then as we get older and somebody tells us something that, we believe that sort of strips it away a little bit, we end up kind of unaware or forgetful about the wholeness, right?
Yeah.
But it's still there. I mean, that's what I believe. It sounds like you do too.
I do. I think sometimes we become lost to ourselves. And,
Yeah.
You're in a profession, I'm in a profession where we want to, allow people to reconnect with that fullness, that wholeness.
Yeah. Can you say that one more time? I think we had a little glitch in the Wi-Fi and I
Oh,
want to
okay.
catch it.
Yeah,
Say
I
it one
was
more
saying
time.
that I think oftentimes people are lost to themselves. And you and I are both in healing professions where, we want to reconnect people with themselves, allow them to see that fullness, that wholeness.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so why don't we get into a little bit of the nitty gritty here? So you and your colleague in your organization have, and it's called She Leads Academy,
Yeah.
right? The
Yep. She
organization
leads
that you started.
academy. Hmm.
You have developed a way of helping us to look at the signs of burnout. So can you tell us about that? Tell the listeners, how have you developed, what have you developed, and what should people be looking for when it comes to burnout? Or what
Yeah.
is burnout? We can talk
Burnout.
about that.
There are three major, signs that you are on the verge of burnout.
Hmm.
And the first one is exhaustion. Like you're just tired. And this is like, my grandmother used to say, you're just bone tired, like
Bone down to the
bone
bone.
tired. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Like this is like, oh, I need a break. I need, some time away from work. You get a week or maybe 2 weeks and you're still depleted. So
Mm.
this is beyond just your normal tired. So that's the first clue that you might be headed toward burnout. The
And when you
second,
say,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say bone tired, are you also pointing to the physical
yes,
manifestation of being tired, not just sleepy, but like you can feel it in your
yeah,
body,
yeah,
depleted?
exactly. It's physical, it's psychological, it's, I believe spiritual too. You're just exhausted.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And
So,
then, yeah, and then the second one is cynicism. And that is when you just get really, really negative. That's when there's like, this storm cloud just constantly, hanging over you. You aren't positive about your life, your career. You often feel, isolated. And it's just like, there's just constant negativity. So that's a
okay.
second indicator of burnout, cynicism.
Okay.
And then the third one is you just become a lot less effective at doing what you need to do. Like you're making mistakes. You're like, it's taking you so much longer to do a project, than it normally would. You just become like I like to work with like goal oriented, high achieving, ambitious women. And a lot of times, like I said, like um, they don't necessarily collapse in terms of their career or their work responsibilities. It just takes them a lot more time, or they make like a few more mistakes than they normally would. So those are the three those are the three indicators that you're burning out. The fact that you are exhausted, you're cynical, and you're a lot less effective at doing what you need to do professionally.
And I would assume, if most people are the way I would anticipate I would be if I were making a lot of mistakes, that there may be some frustration and some irritability or self, attack
Yeah,
almost, So anger might be another emotion that shows up in
a
addition to the cynicism.
100%. Yeah,
Because I'm making all these mistakes and everything's so
yeah,
hard. And yeah, I could see that.
yeah.
And that often, I notice in my practice that often anger is a go-to emotion for people because they hang out there. It's safer there. It's more acceptable in some some ways it's not, but I'll say, well, what's underneath that anger? And if a person is willing to go there, I might find out there's deep grief, or there's
Yeah.
fear, or there's
Yeah.
something else, or there's shame or something else, that they're masking with anger, which is sometimes, a defense mechanism, so
I agree. It's a lot more empowering to be angry than it is to feel, sadness or shame.
yeah.
And I'm glad you brought this up because there is a lot of shame around burnout. My
Hi,
cat.
kitty.
I know there is a lot of shame around burnout,
Yeah, tell
especially
us about that. What, like,
yeah,
people don't want to admit that they're burned out, or they feel like they've been defeated somehow if they have to admit they're exhausted, and you know.
exactly. Like, they're very ambitious, goal oriented people. They like to achieve. Like that is how um, their personal identity is wrapped up in
Mm,
that. That is how they identify. And
right.
so to suddenly not be able to do as much or as well as you did before, if this is part of your identity, there's some shame, there's some loss
Right.
in that. So
And shame, we talk a lot about the body in both of us in our work, because I happen to know a bit about you, and you have this amazing other feature to your work, which has to do with somatic work that you incorporate into your therapy, and I do some in my practice as well. And so what shame does is it has us contract, right? It constricts, and it has people kind of cave in on themselves.
yeah,
And, that can affect how we show up in the world. If you can't sit up tall and open, your heart and your chest, you're going to present to the world in a different way. So for somebody who's goal oriented and likes to be a doer and a go getter, the impact of shame on a physical level, I would think, would run counter to the way they want to show up in the world physically too.
I agree. And when I talk with women, um, you know, it's common for them to say like I haven't told anybody this. Like I haven't told any of
Mm-hmm.
my colleagues that, I'm experiencing burnout because they feel like they're losing their edge. They're
Mm,
losing their identity, they're losing their edge. They have this like professional persona that they have built up.
mm-hmm.
And like, the biggest thing about shame is they don't want anyone to know. It's very isolating.
Right. And
Yeah.
people can be ashamed of the shame.
Exactly.
I I have seen that too, and it makes so much sense. It's like if you're ashamed, you don't want to be called out for being
Exactly.
ashamed. So that's
Exactly.
like a double contraction.
Exactly. It's
So,
compounded. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Okay, I really have questions about how, I know there's so much more that you're going to be able to share with us. I want to know, though, two things. How do you work with people, given that we just kind of established that it's a challenge, especially for the population of people that you work with, like very goal oriented women, who don't want to admit when they're burning out and don't want to admit that they're ashamed of burning out. But, and the other question I have, in a little different vein, is do you notice a difference for Black and Indigenous women of color when it comes to burnout, and the rest of the population? Can you speak
Yeah.
to the either or both of those at some in whatever order you'd like to?
Yeah, about Black and Indigenous, women. What I have found is burnout looks the same, no matter, in my experience, what your ethnicity, your race might be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that Black women um, are a lot less likely to, um, what's the word, stop and take stock of what is happening in their bodies because they're so used to going and doing and
Mm,
doing and doing. That a lot of times the fear is, and this is with burnout in general, not now that I'm going a little bit more global, is
Mm-hmm.
that the concern is if I stop doing what I'm doing, I won't be able to pick it back up and continue. I might
Mm-hmm.
collapse on
Right.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
And like I would say, like I haven't been able to find any definitive statistics, but I know that research shows that the biggest thing that contributes to burnout in women is being a single mother, and that
Mm.
makes perfect sense.
Right.
And
Yeah.
statistics show, according to I think it's Pew, the latest research that I saw on Pew is that 50%, 56% of African American mothers are single mothers. I
Wow.
also know that bias in the workplace can contribute to burnout. So if you
Mm-hmm.
add those two things together, it just makes sense that Black women are more likely to experience burnout. And I'm saying that because this is a constant for them, that they probably don't even recognize that this is what they're going through.
Right. Right. And then I think we also, as a society, I think there's this, I don't know if it's a stereotype or just a theme of recognizing Black women as strong,
Yes,
which on the surface is amazing. Like, who doesn't want to be seen as strong? And it can also be damaging to keep piling on to any human, more, I guess, more responsibility, more work, more strain in the name of, well, you're strong. You can take it. You're a strong Black woman. So you wear that strength as a badge of honor.
yeah,
Meanwhile, you're crumbling inside because, after all, you are human. And yes, Black women are strong. All women can also, exhibit strength. And I
hmm,
think there's a particular strength that goes along with, having endured centuries worth of intergenerational ancestral trauma, going back to what we
yeah,
were talking about earlier. So it's sort of, and my patient that I was describing earlier, you just suck it up and you move on. You're not going to
exactly,
dwell. So it's this whole
exactly,
theme, which is a blessing and a curse at the same
exactly.
time.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what I want to change, especially around um, women of color. Like you mentioned, the badge of honor, like that. Um, that concerns me
Yeah.
because I want Black women and all women of color to feel strong, but I
Yeah.
also want them to recognize when they need rest, when they need support, and feel comfortable, reaching out or building their social circles to allow that to happen. So that's very important to me personally.
I agree 100%. And the thing about strength is that what often doesn't get discussed when it comes to strength is that anything that's strong has a foundation supporting it underneath. So it may be exhibiting strength. If you think about a tree, a tall, strong looking tree that is standing erect and, looks like it's going to live forever, has very deep roots. And
Exactly.
for humans, those deep roots have to do with rest and nourishment and stopping and pausing and tending ourselves and self-care. So in order to be the strong people that we can be, we need to have a strong foundation underneath what you don't see. You might see
Exactly.
this person out there moving and grooving and shaking and, baking, but if they're not, if there's no foundation underneath, if there's nothing to nourish and support underneath, it's going to collapse.
Exactly.
So that
Exactly.
is, I guess, what you would call burnout, right?
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
collapse.
Yeah.
So let's move to the second part of the question, which is, what do you do? How do you do your work?
Yeah. Like my partner and I, we created this program called the She Thrives Master Program.
Mm-hmm.
And I was super excited about the launch of this program. And I was super excited because I knew that it would have helped me. I, I burned out in my career,
Mm,
and my partner, she burnt out in her career, and we bonded over the fact that we had these traumatic burnout experiences. And so
mm-hmm.
what we did is we read the books, we read the articles about burnout, but we also used our personal experiences in order to create this program. And that
Mm,
and for me that's critical, because I have so many women who will come to me and say, like, Tiffany, I'm busy. I don't think I'm burning out. Like, I think it just might be like time management. And so what
mm-hmm.
they do is they take the time management class, they ink out another 3 to 5 hours in their schedule. And because they have this predisposition, they fill it up. They
Oh,
fill up that time slowly over the months, coming the next few months, with other stuff. And so
so they
what
get really efficient in managing their
yes,
time only to add more to their
exactly.
plate, not
Exactly.
to create space in the schedule.
Exactly. So
Uh,
so with our program, we get real. Like we do an assessment. We do an
uh-huh.
assessment. That's the first step to
Is that the
determine.
online quiz that I took?
Yeah,
I went, okay.
exactly. Yeah, there's an online quiz
Uh-huh.
on our website. How much
Which
stress is too
is,
much?
let's say it, we'll say it again at the end of the episode, but www.sheleadsacademy.com. And I think, is that right?
Yep,
Sheleadsacademy.com.
that's it.
And
That's
I
it.
think the quiz pops up right when you log on for the first time, when you get to the website.
Yeah, I think it,
Yeah.
it does. And if it doesn't, it's in the on the bottom, I think, left of our webpage, the quiz.
Okay. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great tool to start people off because, like we
exactly.
already said, people who are burnt out or burning out may not even realize that that's what's happening
Exactly.
and they
Because
don't
this
want to admit it if it is.
exactly because this is a constant. This is the way that they've lived pretty much their
Mm-hmm.
whole lives, just doing, doing, doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we start with assessment that includes that quiz and includes some other um, benchmarks that my partner and I have put together.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we do is we move toward envisioning, and we do this because I found that a lot of times we are not living the lives that um, are authentic to ourselves. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we're running, other people's scripts. Like, just because your mom was a corporate attorney doesn't necessarily mean like that's the best fit for you. Maybe you want to be an environmental attorney, or maybe you want to be a chef or a teacher, or I don't
Right.
know. Yeah. So we really define, what success looks like for
Mm-hmm.
you. And then
Okay.
the final stage of the process is that we recreate based on this, visioning process. We take, small, large steps in terms of carving out this life that you have, that you envision for yourself. So that's
Mm.
essentially the overview of the She Thrives Master Program.
Wow. Okay. So it's called the She Thrives Master Program, and that can
Mm-hmm.
be found on the website if anyone's interested in learning more about
Exactly.
it, taking the
Yeah.
quiz, reaching out to you. If someone wanted to contact you directly, we can also say this again at the end of the episode, but just to
Yeah.
pop it in, can they email you?
They can. They can email me at Tiffany, Tiffany, at sheleadsacademy.com.
Okay, great. And we'll repeat that again.
Okay.
Um, I is there anything else you wanted to say that we didn't touch on when it comes to burnout? I know it's a big topic and we could talk about it for a long time, but is there anything that's critical that should be shared?
No, I
Like,
just want, no, what were you going to say?
oh, I was going to say, I think before when we decided that you would come on the show, you did say something about signs of burnout in the workplace. Do you feel like
Yes.
that's important? So people
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
working in a corporate environment or any type of workplace, they could be on the lookout for some signs.
Yeah. Some of the major, there are five major contributors to workplace burnout. And I mentioned one of these before, which is bias. Like, if you feel like your supervisor or your coworkers have bias against you,
Mm-hmm.
that could definitely lead to some unease and burnout in the workplace.
Mm.
There's also, if you have um, too much work, if you're constantly, being, given like, this project to do and this project to do and this project to do, like that's a major contributor to burnout, too much work. Also, not having enough time to do the work that you have. Like if you have like crazy turnaround times, that could also lead to, burnout symptoms. And then there's the lack of communication with your supervisor or the senior leadership team. If you feel like you're on your own, you're not getting the proper feedback, major burnout symptom. And then the other one is if your work responsibilities are changing all the time. If for some reason you had 3 direct reports and now you have 8, or you were responsible for this part of the company, and now like they're adding on like these extra responsibilities. All of those are major contributors to burnout.
Oh, wow. So let's recap. There were 5 of them.
Yes.
Let me see if I could do it.
Okay. Yes.
You said there's too much work.
Yes.
It's one of them. Yeah, too much work, and then you have not enough time to do the work that you are supposed to be assigned. So, too much work, not enough time. Yep. Poor communication with your supervisor.
Yep.
Could be one. Changing job responsibilities constantly. So it's like playing a game of, I guess, hide the ball. Oh, here now you're supposed to do this. Now you're supposed to do that. And bias in the workplace. I think that was the first one you said.
Yeah.
And that makes me think about what we started talking about earlier, like those microaggressions.
Yep.
That one, oh my gosh, I know this has happened to me. Like when you said you'd say something in a meeting and you'd get looked right, somebody would look right through you and to your white coworker next to you as if what you said wasn't even a thing, or needed, to be validated by the person sitting next to you or something like that.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff, I guess, would wear on you. So any kind of bias, including racial bias, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, I think some people are really quick, especially people who haven't been on the receiving end of microaggressions, are really quick to dismiss them, like, oh, that's not a big deal, or whatever. And I myself, just as we talked about coping mechanism, like had a tendency to dismiss those. But what I realize now is that it's death by 1,000 cuts. Like those things just over time, they just add up and they negatively impact you. So
right. Well, I guess my dog wants to say something about that.
We're having like the visit from all the animals today.
Right. We are. I mean, and that's, again, welcome to life within a pandemic.
Exactly.
I'm going to mute my mic for a second.
Okay. He wanted to be a part of the podcast, Leah. That's all.
We can edit that out. I think his dad is home.
Oh, he's excited.
There's no stopping him from barking, or either his dad or the mail carrier. Something's going on out in the front. And I said, I'm going to edit out all of this chit chat, but I said I was going to put him in his crate during the podcast. And then I was lulled by him into thinking that he was going to be quiet. Like, he's a dog. Why would I think so? So anyway.
Trickery.
I know. Let's see. He's thrown me off a little bit of my game. Okay, so next. So I'm going to edit this portion out of the video and the audio. To remember to do that. Or people could just listen in and say, oh, isn't that fun? They're chit-chatting. And, okay, I think we might be safe.
Okay.
All right, and let's start again now. So, Tiffany, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise on the subject of burnout. And I do have a couple of more questions just to wrap us up and bring us home. I would love to know, how do you take care of yourself as you're out here, in your practice, taking care of others? based on your experience of having burned out and having, a really intense situation happen to you, which led you to this work, what do you do these days for self-care?
Well, I am an avid meditator, like just
Mm.
mindfulness meditation or um, body centered meditation, like the body scan, or maybe even um, some chakra meditations. Like those are
Mm-hmm.
very helpful for me. I used to run, but I had like a bit of a foot injury, last summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out like, what's the best, thing for me, aerobic exercise wise. But these days I just dance. I just put on some
Oh,
music in my house and I
nice.
just dance.
Nice. So some
Yeah,
movement can be therapeutic for you for self-care, and also some stillness and quieting
exactly.
your mind and scanning your body. I love that. Are
Yeah.
there any resources that you might share with the listeners as far as people, a lot of people get scared when I start talking about meditation, like, oh, I can't do it, but there's so many different forms of meditation. Body scanning and body meditation is a beautiful way, to get into it. But do you have any, suggestions for people who are just learning about this?
I'm trying to think what would be a good suggestion for beginners. I like, there's some, I like Dan Harris. Like he has a podcast called 10%
Mm-hmm.
Happier.
I've heard
Um,
of that. Yeah.
yeah. And I like it because he talks about meditation. He talks about, he interviews a lot of experts in the field of meditation. I think he has a subscription service as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I like Dan Harris. Headspace is good. I like Headspace.
And that's an
And
app for people who
yeah,
don't know. It's an app that you can download. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And there's just so many like, resources out there. Like not even necessarily meditation, but I like the nap ministry. Have you heard of the nap ministry?
Yes, I love the Nat Ministry. I have her on my Instagram feed, and when her messages pop up, I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to sit down right now. I'm going to sit in that chaise
Exactly.
lounge right now.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's
It's
just good reminders because we need to be, unfortunately, prompted sometimes and reminded that it's okay to rest.
yeah.
And I also love the Nat Ministries messaging, which is all about how, as Black people in this country, it was illegal
Yeah.
throughout history at certain points to rest. It was not okay, especially, obviously during slavery. If you got a break, it wasn't for your own pleasure. It was maybe because, they couldn't get anything else out of you, or you're physically injured, or the day was over and there was no light to do the work or whatever. But it wasn't like people were luxuriating in rest. And then, in periods after that, laws were created around, no loitering or, what have you, where people could be rounded up and arrested
Mhm.
for not doing something, for not
Mhm.
working on
Mhm.
Saturday and things like that. So this is
Mhm.
ingrained. Once again, this is something that we carry in our community, and it doesn't occur to people that it's okay to rest. It feels wrong in some
Yeah.
ways,
Yeah.
and too indulgent, or actually, frankly, scary, you know? And like you were saying earlier, especially people who are on the go, go, go track, and if I stop, I might collapse,
Yep.
you know? It is frightening for people. I've often, invited people in my treatment room to, really slow down inside, in their bodies and experience the stillness and the quiet. And they'll say sometimes, like, please don't, I want to feel energized when I leave here. It's like drinking coffee when you need a nap. If your body's telling you you're tired, take a nap. You don't just pump it full of caffeine so you can keep going. But that's kind of in the culture, right? And I'm
I
not talking
agree.
about one aspect of the culture. I'm talking about the culture at large, Western culture. You could call it white supremacy culture as well.
I agree. And that's why you know, I think it's kind of maybe a bit of a disposition. And I think, with African American women, I'm sure some of that gets translated down from an intergenerational trauma, like the fear of maybe even taking a moment to just, sit and rest because your ancestors did not, have that luxury. And there's probably some feelings associated with that. So I agree with what you were saying. Yeah. Yeah. And I also like, you know, this is what I try to tell, like, my high achieving women, is that taking care of yourself is an act of social activism. I think it Audre Lorde who said something about, like, self-care is a act of revolution, or
Resistance.
yes, I forgot the exact quote, but that's what I believe.
Yes.
I
Yes.
believe that, like, there is value, there is a pride, resiliency in taking a moment just to care for yourself. Like, maybe our ancestors did not have the luxury in the same way, but we have that luxury, and I believe that we need to exercise that luxury and have this opportunity to care for ourselves.
Right. And then maybe taking it even one step further from luxury to requirement or necessity.
Exactly.
Because as we were saying earlier, you don't get to be indefinitely strong and powerful without, eventually collapsing and burning out. There's got to be
Exactly.
something to fuel that, just like everything else in nature. There's the yin and there's the yang. And so if it's always yang, if it's always the up and out, rising, doing, active, that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
ultimately, if you got to nourish the yin, the quiet and the rest and the stillness.
Exactly. And that I want Black women to have sustainable success. I want them to have health and balance. And I feel like I did not have that in my life. Like that, I think I've shared this with you before, Leah, is that I believe people can grow from wisdom or from pain. And I
Mm-hmm.
definitely grew from pain. And so I'm hoping that by, sharing what I've been able to learn, particularly with women of color, then they might have an opportunity to grow by wisdom and not necessarily have to take the road that I did. So,
Beautiful. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I want to remind everybody where they can reach you. So, could you tell us one more time your website and your email?
yeah, the website is sheleadsacademy.com, and my email is tiffany@sheleadsacademy.com.
Awesome. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to take us out to end the podcast today. I want to thank Tiffany Green, my guest, for joining us today and sharing all of her wisdom, experience, knowledge. Um, my dog wants to thank you.
I know. Hi, Bob.
He's like, Tiffany's leaving. Oh no. And I want to thank everyone listening to this podcast for tuning in once again to join us for the whole 5/5. And that will do it for today. Peace, everybody.